When Mr. Elijah Brooks stepped off the bus that morning, he thought he was helping a stranger, not stepping into a storm that would make headlines, break hearts, and heal wounds older than the city itself. Before we begin, drop your city in the comments and hit subscribe. If you believe the smallest act can change a life. The city was still waking up when Mr. Elijah Brooks stepped off the number 14 bus, worn shoes pressing quietly against the cracked sidewalk. The morning air smelled like rain on warm pavement, like something was trying to start fresh even if the city wasn't ready to let it. Elijah adjusted the brown cap on his graying hair, the fabric soft from years of use, and glanced around as the bus hissed away behind him. His hands were steady, but his knees ached, reminding him of the factory job he had walked away from 20 years ago, when the machines replaced the men who fed their families on overtime. He didn't have much, but he had enough to share, even if it was only the warmth of his quiet nods and the small kindnesses people often overlooked. That morning, his plan was simple. Walk to the church pantry, help unpack the bread deliveries, and then visit the corner cafe for his 1 cup of black coffee before heading home to his 1-bedroom apartment, where the sound of the city at night felt like company. But halfway down the block, he saw her. She was standing at the bus stop, clutching a small boy to her hip, her shoulders tense, her eyes darting every few seconds over her shoulder as if she expected something or someone to appear. The boy, maybe 2, was too quiet for a child his age. His small hand twisted into her shirt, his eyes wide and hollow. His curls matted against her neck where he had tucked himself, hiding from the world. Elijah paused. Something about the way the young mother shifted her weight, the way her free hand trembled as she wiped sweat from her brow, felt off. He had seen fear before, and he recognized its quiet, invisible scream. People walked past her, eyes down, headphones in, coffee cups in hand, ignoring the small storm brewing in plain sight. Elijah took a step closer, enough to see the bruising under the cuff of her sleeve when the wind pushed it up, enough to see the way she winced when the boy shifted in her arms. She noticed him watching. Their eyes met for a brief, crackling moment, and Elijah gave her a small nod, a quiet promise that he saw her. Really saw her. She looked away, hugging the child closer. Elijah glanced down the street. A man was watching too, leaning against a dented sedan across the street, cigarette pinched between angry fingers. Eyes locked on the young mother like a wolf in no hurry. He wore a cap pulled low, his jaw tight, a twitch under his eye betraying a dangerous impatience. Elijah knew trouble when he saw it. He cleared his throat, adjusted his cap, and walked to the young mother, stopping just close enough so she could hear his low voice. "You all right, miss?" he asked gently, careful not to crowd her, giving her room to step away if she needed it. She flinched, glancing at the man across the street, then back at Elijah. I'm fine," she said, her voice too tight, her lie hanging in the air like the thick summer humidity. Elijah nodded, looking at the boy, offering him a small smile. The boy peeked up just for a second and then hid again. "That your boy?" Elijah asked softly. She swallowed. "Liam." Elijah nodded again, as if they were discussing the weather, as if he hadn't noticed the fear in her eyes. "You know, there's a cafe down the street. They give out free coffees some mornings. Maybe you and your boy could sit for a bit. Rest." She looked at him like he had just offered her a lifeline she wasn't sure she was allowed to take. Behind them, the man across the street flicked his cigarette to the ground and began walking toward them. Elijah's eyes hardened, but he kept his face calm. "Come on, miss, just for a minute." She hesitated, then nodded, shifting the boy on her hip, and followed Elijah down the street. They reached the cafe, its door chiming as Elijah pushed it open. The man from across the street stopped at the corner watching them, his jaw working as he chewed on whatever anger was keeping him there. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and cinnamon, and the young mother's shoulders lowered just a fraction as she sank into a chair by the window. Elijah bought 2 coffees, one for himself, one with extra cream for her, and a small muffin for the boy, who eyed it like it was a miracle. They sat in silence, the sounds of spoons clinking against cups and low chatter filling the space between. Them outside, the man paced, glaring through the glass. The young mother took a shaky breath, her hands wrapped around the coffee cup like it was the only warm thing she had held in weeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Elijah nodded. "You don't owe me anything, just wanted to make sure you're safe." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "My name's Sophia," she said finally. "And this is Liam." Elijah smiled softly. "Elijah Brooks. It's good to meet you, Sophia." For a moment, it was just a cafe on a quiet morning. It's just an old man, a young mother, and a child sharing a moment of peace. But outside, trouble was waiting. And Elijah knew it. And in that quiet, he made a decision he didn't know would change everything. The coffee in Mr. Elijah Brooks' cup was lukewarm. But he sipped it anyway, watching the street through the rain-smudged cafe window. Outside, Mark Lane's restless. Pacing had turned into leaning against the lamppost, arms folded across his chest, eyes narrowed like a wolf staking out prey. Inside, it was warm enough to pretend for a moment that the world wasn't waiting to bite. Sofia Lane cradled her, cup as if afraid to drink, as if the small act of comfort might break her open. Her brown hair was tied in a loose knot, frizzed around the edges where stress had pulled it thin, and her face so young. Too young carried the exhausted defiance of someone who had learned to survive one day at a time. Liam, her son, licked muffin crumbs from his small fingers, watching Elijah with those big, silent eyes. He didn't laugh, didn't babble the way toddlers often did. Instead, he seemed to exist on high alert, eyes darting to his mother's every breath, reading her face as if for permission to be alive. Elijah knew that look. He had seen it in his sister's children back in Birmingham years before he had packed his things and come north. Thinking he could leave the past in the red dirt of Alabama, thinking he could leave behind the nights when shouting turned to crashes when mothers held their babies close, praying the walls would hold. He knew what it meant to grow up quiet, to be small, so someone else's anger wouldn't find you. Sophia's hand trembled around the cup. Her eyes started to the window, to the man waiting, and back down to the table. She swallowed a small, stiff movement. "You don't have to tell me nothing," Elijah said, his voice low, comforting. "It's got comforting as steady as the rain ticking against the glass. Sometimes it's enough just to sit a while." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "It's him," she whispered, eyes flicking to the window. "Mark." Elijah nodded once, slowly. He's not supposed to." "Be here," she continued, her voice shaking, her free hand rubbing circles on Liam's back. "There's a restraining order, but he doesn't care." Liam pressed his face into her side, the way a baby bird hides under its mother's wing. "I see," Elijah said softly. The quiet between them was heavy, like a held breath. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said suddenly, words spilling out like a dam breaking. "My mom's gone, and the shelter is full. I was trying to get to the courthouse today, to get the paperwork fixed. But he found us." She stopped, her eyes brimming but refusing to spill over. "I'm sorry," she added quickly, ashamed, as if her fear was an inconvenience. Elijah shook his head. "Don't you dare be sorry, child." He looked out the window again, at Mark's shadow, at the storm cloud waiting to crack open. Thought about the small apartment he went home to every night, the one bedroom with the blue curtains and the single rocking chair where he read his Bible under the soft hum of the old ceiling fan. It's quiet there, too quiet, filled with the memories of his late wife's laughter and the smell of cornbread on Sundays. He thought about how every evening he lined up his pill bottles on the counter too for the blood pressure. One for the knees, one for the cholesterol, and how the nights were long when you didn't have anyone to talk to. He thought about the promise he had made to his wife on her last day in the hospital. "I'll keep doing good. Ruth, I'll keep finding ways to help even if the world feels too big without you." And then he looked at Sofia Lane and Liam, and he knew that maybe today was that day. "You got family anywhere else?" Elijah asked gently. She shook her head, hugging Liam closer. "He says I belong to him," she whispered. Elijah's jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed kind. "You don't belong to nobody but yourself, and that boy belongs to you," he said softly. Outside, Mark Lane pushed off the lamppost, pacing again, the tension in his shoulders turning sharper with every passing minute. Inside, Elijah and Sophia sat quietly, the world narrowing down to the small circle of warmth they shared around the table. The ticking clock above the coffee machines, and the soft sound of Liam's breath as he fell asleep against his mother's chest. When Elijah stepped outside later, the rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low, heavy with unfallen storms. Lane was waiting, his eyes narrowing as Elijah approached. "Old man," Mark sneered, stepping forward. "You got something of mine in there." Elijah adjusted his cap, looking Mark in the eye with the calm, unblinking patience of someone who had faced down worse things than a bitter young man. "Ain't nothing in there that belongs to you," Elijah said, his voice soft but firm. Mark's lip curled, anger flashing like lightning in his eyes. "You don't know what you're getting into." Elijah stepped closer, close enough that Mark could see the lines in his face, the quiet steel in his eyes. "You don't know me," Elijah replied. For a moment, Mark faltered, confusion flickering across his face. "I'm just telling you," Mark said, stepping back, trying to regain control. "She's mine." Elijah didn't flinch. "No, son, she's not." Mark's fists clenched at his sides, but Elijah didn't step back. "Walk away, son," Elijah said, his voice low, his eyes unblinking. "Ain't nothing good gonna come of you standing here." Mark's jaw worked, anger and confusion battling behind his eyes. But Elijah just stood there, the quiet storm of a man who had nothing to lose and nothing to prove. After a moment, Mark spat on the ground, turned, and walked away. His shoulders stiffed with the weight of a battle he didn't want to fight in daylight. Elijah watched him go, his hands steady, his breath even, the street around him slowly returning to its morning rhythms. Inside the cafe, Sophia watched from the window, tears finally falling as she saw Mark disappear around the corner. Elijah returned to the table, sitting down across from Sophia, who was wiping her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. Elijah shook his head, his eyes soft. "You don't need to thank me. You just need to stay safe." She nodded, hugging Liam closer, the child's small hand clutching her collar. They sat there in silence, letting the world catch its breath. That afternoon, Elijah called an old friend officer, James Carter, a young black officer who had grown up in the neighborhood, who still visited Elijah every Sunday at church, shaking his hand and calling him Uncle Eli, even though they weren't related. When Elijah explained, James listened, his jaw tightening as he took notes. "I'll keep an eye out," James promised, glancing at Sophia, who was holding Liam on, her hip rocking him gently as he slept. "You do that," Elijah said softly, "and make sure she gets to that courthouse tomorrow." James nodded, squeezing Elijah's shoulder. "You're a good man, Uncle Eli," James said. Elijah didn't answer, just nodded, his eyes on Sophia and Liam. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt like a man doing what needed to be done. That night, Elijah returned to his quiet apartment. Sitting in his rocking chair by the window, as the streetlights flickered on outside, he thought about Ruth, about the promise he had made to her, about the way her hands had felt when they danced in the kitchen, the way her laughter had filled the small spaces of their lives. He thought about Sophia, about the way she had looked at him with that raw, terrified gratitude, about the way Liam had finally fallen asleep in her arms. And he thought about Mark Lane, about the anger in the young man's eyes, the storm that hadn't fully passed. Elijah leaned back in his chair, letting the darkness settle around him, and whispered into the quiet, "I did what I could today, Ruth. I hope it was enough. Outside the city sighed, the night pressing in with its heavy silence, and Elijah closed his eyes, letting himself rest for the first time in days. The morning light was soft as it spilled across Mr. Elijah Brooks' small kitchen, brushing against the chipped counter, the neatly stacked dishes. The quiet dignity of a home that had seen both laughter and grief. He poured water into the kettle, his hands steady despite the storm brewing in his mind. Sofia and Liam were asleep. In the spare cot in his living room, a quilt pulled up to Liam's chin as he clutched a small quilled teddy bear someone at the cafe had given him. Sofia's hand rested protectively on Liam's back, even in sleep, her face soft but still lined with exhaustion. Elijah watched them for a moment, a heaviness in his chest. They deserved peace, safety, a chance to breathe, and it was his job now to protect that. The kettle whistled softly, steam rising like a prayer, and Elijah made a cup of tea, the scent of chamomile filling the small room. As he sipped, he prayed quietly, "Lord, give me the strength to do right by them. Let me be the shield they need." Outside, the city was waking up, unaware that lives were about to change forever. Officer James Carter knocked on the door just after sunrise. His uniform was crisp, his badge catching the light, but the worry in his eyes betrayed the quit. "Wait," he carried. "Elijah," James said, stepping inside, "we've got a problem." Sofia stirred, blinking awake, pulling Liam closer as she sat up, fear clouding her features. "What is it?" Elijah asked. James glanced at Sofia, then back at Elijah. "Mark's been seen hanging around the courthouse and the cafe," James said. "He's asking about you, about Sofia. He's angry, Elijah. He's saying you're trying to take his family." Sofia's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. Elijah nodded slowly, the weight settling in his bones. "He's going to come here." James sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Patrol the block, keep an eye out. But if he shows up, you call me. Promise me." Elijah looked at Sofia, at the fear in her eyes, at Liam's small, trusting face peeking over the blanket. "I promise," Elijah said. "It happened faster than anyone expected." Sofia was helping Elijah fold the blankets, Liam toddling at her side when a loud bang shook the door. The old wood rattled, the hinges groaning as another fist slammed against it. "Open up, old man." Mark's voice roared from the hallway. "I know she's in there." Sofia froze, Liam pressing against her legs, tears welling in his eyes. Elijah stepped forward, putting himself between Sofia and the door. "Take Liam to the back room," Elijah said quietly. Sofia hesitated, fear paralyzing her, but Elijah turned, his eyes gentle but firm. "Go," he repeated. Sofia scooped Liam into her arms, retreating into the small bedroom as Mark's fists continued to pound on the door. Elijah took a deep breath, gripping the old doorknob, and opened the door. Mark stumbled inside, his eyes wild, sweat beading on his forehead, the anger rolling off him in waves. "Where is she?" Mark demanded, shoving past Elijah, scanning. "The room? She don't want to see you, son," Elijah said calmly, closing the door behind him. "Don't call me that." Mark snapped, turning on Elijah, his fists clenched, his body vibrating with rage. "You think you can take her from me? Take my son." Elijah stood his ground, his eyes steady. "They're not yours to take, Mark." Mark's chest heaved, his jaw working as he struggled to contain the storm inside him. "You don't know what it's like," Mark hissed. "You don't know what it's like to be left, to be nothing, to have everyone walk away." Elijah's eyes softened, pain flickering across his face. "I know more than you think." Mark's eyes narrowed, confusion cutting through the rage for a brief moment. "What are you talking about?" Mark demanded. Elijah reached into his pocket, pulling out the worn photograph of Micah. "This was your father," Elijah said softly, holding the photo out. Mark's eyes widened, his breath catching as he stared at the image, recognition and confusion warring. On his face, "This is him," Mark whispered. Elijah nodded. Micah Brooks, my son, your father. Mark's hands trembled as he reached for the photo, his fingers brushing the edges before he pulled back, shaking his head. Mark said, backing away, his voice breaking. No, you're lying. Elijah stepped closer, tears welling in his eyes. I didn't know, Mark. I didn't know you were my grandson. I didn't know you were out there needing someone. Mark's face crumpled, his body folding in on itself as he pressed his hands to his head. He left me, Mark whispered. He left us. My mom. She died and he never came back. And now you want to take them from me too? Elijah's own tears fell as he shook his head. I'm not taking them, Mark. I'm protecting them. From you, from the anger that's eating you alive. Mark sank to his knees, the rage dissolving into sobs that shook his entire body. I don't know how to stop, Mark cried. I don't know how to be anything else. Elijah knelt down in front of him, placing a hand on Mark's shoulder. You don't have to be like him, Elijah said softly. You don't have to be like me. You can choose to be better. Mark looked up, his eyes red and swollen, tears streaking down his face. Why would you help me? Mark asked, his voice small, broken. Elijah's hand tightened on his shoulder, his voice steady. 'Cause you're family. And because Liam deserves a father who knows how to love, not hurt. The door burst open and Officer James Carter stepped in, his hand on his radio. Elijah, is everything? James froze as he saw Mark on his knees, sobbing, Elijah's hand on his shoulder. James, Elijah said, looking back, it's okay. James looked at Mark, then at Elijah, his eyes softening as he took in the scene. Sofia appeared in the doorway, Liam clutching her neck, his eyes wide and frightened. Mark turned, his eyes meeting Sofia's, guilt and regret crashing over him. I'm sorry, Mark whispered, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry. Sofia's eyes filled with tears, her arms tightening around Liam. Elijah stood, helping Mark to his feet, steadying him as the younger man swayed. James stepped forward, placing a hand on Mark's other shoulder. We'll get you help, James said softly, but you need to come with me. Mark nodded, tears still falling, his body trembling as he allowed James to guide him toward the door. Before they left, Mark turned back, his eyes finding Elijah's. Thank you, Mark whispered. Elijah nodded, his own tears falling. You take care of yourself, Mark. And with that, James led Mark out of the apartment, the door closing softly behind them. The apartment was silent, the storm having passed, leaving a heavy, sacred quiet in its wake. Sofia sank to the floor, clutching Liam, tears streaming down her face. Elijah knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. It's over, Elijah whispered. You're safe now. Sofia looked up, her eyes red, her face streaked with tears. Why did you do this for us? She asked, her voice shaking. Elijah smiled softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. Because sometimes the smallest act of love can rewrite someone's whole story, Elijah said. And I reckon it's time we all got a new story. Sofia sobbed, pressing her forehead to Elijah's shoulder. Liam nestled between them, the three of them wrapped in the quiet, fragile hope of a new beginning. The apartment felt different the next morning, like the air had shifted, the heaviness replaced by a quiet promise of something new. Outside, the city was waking up, the sunrise washing the streets in soft gold, turning even the cracked sidewalks into rivers of light. Elijah Brooks stood at the window, a cup of tea warming his hands, watching the world begin again. Behind him, Sofia Lane stirred on the small cot, Liam's tiny hand tangled in her hair, his breath soft against her shoulder. For the first time in weeks, Sofia had slept through the night without waking to check the locks, without flinching at every sound in the dark. When she opened her eyes and saw Elijah at the window, she smiled a small, tired smile, but a smile. Nonetheless, good morning, she whispered. Elijah turned, smiling back. Morning, Sofia. Liam woke, rubbing his eyes, blinking up at his mother, then at Elijah, and for the first time. He didn't look afraid. Later that morning, Officer James Carter returned, wearing plain clothes instead of his uniform, carrying a small stack of papers in a folder. "Morning, Uncle Eli," James said, nodding to Sophia and Liam. "Sophia, we've got the paperwork ready for emergency housing and protection. And there's a spot at the women's shelter that opened up this morning." Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the folder, then at Elijah. "You don't have to leave right away," Elijah said softly, "but this is your step forward. Your and Liam's." Sophia nodded, holding Liam close, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "I want him to grow up safe," she whispered. "I don't want him to be afraid anymore." Elijah's eyes softened. "He won't be. You're stronger than you know, Sophia." Meanwhile, across town, Mark Lane sat in a small, cold cell. The concrete floor hard beneath him, the thin blanket doing little to keep out the chill. His hands were bandaged from the fight with himself, his knuckles raw from the years of trying to hit away the ghosts that haunted him. In his hand, he clutched the photograph Elijah had given him, the photos of Micah Brooks, his father, smiling in the summer sun. For the first time in years, Mark let himself cry, not the angry, hot tears of frustration, but the deep, cleansing tears that came from a place so old it felt like it belonged to another lifetime. Officer James Carter visited, sliding a pamphlet across the table to Mark. "It's a program," James said, "for anger management, addiction, family trauma. You can choose not to take it, and you'll do your time like everyone else. Or you can try to break the cycle." Mark looked at the pamphlet, then at James. "Why do you care?" Mark asked, his voice hoarse. James leaned back, folding his arms. "Because Elijah cares. And that means I care." Mark closed his eyes, pressing the photo to his chest. "I don't want to be like him," Mark whispered. "Then don't," James replied. And for the first time, Mark believed it might be possible. When the day came for Sophia and Liam to move into the women's shelter, the sky was clear, the summer sun warm but gentle. Sophia packed the small bag of clothes Elijah had helped her gather, Liam holding his teddy bear, looking up at Elijah with wide, trusting eyes. Sophia turned to Elijah, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "You saved us." Elijah smiled softly, kneeling down to look at Liam. "You take care of your mama, you hear," Kala said, ruffling Liam's curls. Liam nodded, a small smile breaking across his face. Sophia hugged Elijah tightly, and for a moment they stood there. Two souls who had found family in the unlikeliest of places. "You'll be okay," Elijah whispered. "So will you," Sophia replied. As they walked away, Elijah stood in the doorway, the light framing him like a promise, watching them go toward a future that was finally truly theirs. That evening, Elijah returned to his rocking chair by the window, the sunset painting the sky in streaks of purple and gold. He held the photograph of Ruth, his wife, in his hands, brushing his thumb across her smiling face. "I did what I could today, Ruth," Elijah whispered. "I hope it was enough." The city outside continued its hum, cars passing, children laughing, the world moving forward as it always did. But inside, Elijah felt something different, a quiet peace. The knowledge that he had kept his promise, that he had stepped in where it mattered, that he had become the shield someone else needed. He thought of Sophia, of the strength she found in herself, of the way she had held Liam with the fierce, quiet love only a mother could give. He thought of Mark, the brokenness, the anger, the moment of surrender when he realized he didn't have to be his father's son in all the wrong ways. And he thought of Liam, the way the little boy's eyes had finally filled with trust instead of fear, in a world that rushes past the hurting, the unseen, the scared sometimes. It's the smallest act of love that rewrites someone's whole story. Mr. Elijah Brooks wasn't a hero in the way the world measures heroes, but he was exactly the hero Sophia needed. Exactly the shield Liam needed, exactly the chance Mark needed. And in that quiet, ordinary kindness, a cycle was broken and a family was found. If you believe that even small kindnesses can change the world, drop A in the comments and share this story. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to remember, it's never too late to choose a different ending.